Hola a todas y a todos, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a este espacio para practicar un poco de español. Me llamo David, soy de Colombia y estoy feliz de estar aquí, como siempre. My name is David, you can call me David. In Spanish we say David. And I'm always very happy to be here with my friend and colleague David from the US. Hi David, how are you?
Ah, Hola a todos y a todas. Como siempre, yo también estoy emocionado de estar aquí con ustedes. I'm, as always, so happy to be here with you all. I'm doing well. David, I have a question for you because yo veo que tú estás en un nuevo lugar. I see that you're in a new place. What's up?
Yes, sí, tienes razón, you're right. Esta es mi casa nueva. This is my new house. No, I'm kidding. I'm back here in Germany. I'm broadcasting today from Berlin. It's 7 p.m. So it's a bit late here, but as you can see, it's very hell. Estoy en un apartamento luminoso. Yeah? I'm very happy here to be back home, and it's always for me a pleasure from Bogota or from Berlin to be here with you. And yeah, so this is these are the news, and I think we can get started with today's topic. But before we do that, do you remember that we had a sentence that we reviewed last week? So we would like to see your answers. Remember last week's topic? It was direct object with the preposition a, the personal a in Spanish. So let's have a quick review of what we learned last week. And that's why I have this question for you. That starts with vas a visitar el domingo. And here we have two options. What is the right answer? What do you think? So you're welcome to add the number. One, if you think it's quién. Two, if you think it's a quién vas a visitar el domingo. And we already see some answers. This is great.
Wow.
David, all of them
Very
right.
impressed. Yeah, let's go ahead and just choose any one of these many right answers. So Sonia, oh, where did her answer go? She says a quién, and that's exactly correct. So the sentence would be a quién vas a visitar el domingo. So remember, like we talked about last week, we use the preposition a before a direct object that refers to a person. So the verb visitar, to visit, would have a direct object, somebody. It could be visitar a David, visitar a mi madre. In the sentence, it's visitar a quién. We're not sure exactly who it is, but it is somebody. It's a person. So we say a quién vas a visitar el domingo. And we can think of this in English as the word whom. I know the distinction between who and whom is a really tricky one, and not many people even practice using whom as native English speakers. But you would say in English, if you wanted to be a stickler for grammar, you would say, whom are you going to visit on Sunday? So that is the right answer. Great job to everyone who got that right. It's very impressive.
Yeah, that's great. It's great to see this. And this is also the way we make the difference in Spanish between quién, as if it were the subject. When you say, for example, ¿quién está contigo? Who is with you? And ¿a quién vas a visitar el domingo? ¿A quién conoces tú? ¿A quién no conoces? So this is how it works. If we had here a direct object that refer to an object, to a thing, then we would say just ¿qué vas a visitar en México, for example, if we are referring to a place. So as you can see, this a is personal, it's not optional. But I would like also to mention something that I forgot to say last week, which is if you forget to add this personal a, it's not going to be a big deal. people will understand, despite the fact that you drop the a. But it's always correct to use it. It's recommended, and please do that. Practice this, and come up with sentences that you would say in Spanish, and that's a good way actually to have this in an automatic way. And this was the topic that we presented last week, and we prepared something for you. Today we learn a bit more about adjectives and how they work in Spanish. David, that's right?
That is exactly right. And this topic is one that I believe it was Dana or Phyllis or someone a couple of weeks ago asked in a question, and we decided to turn it into a whole topic because it's a great question. And it's about the placement of adjectives before or after nouns. So we'll share our presentation with you today, answer your questions, and see how much we can learn together about adjectives. But first, let's go ahead and talk about what adjectives are, because that's one of the most important things we can do as a foundation for this topic. When you learn Spanish, of course, you have to learn about adjectives. They exist in languages across the world. They exist in English. And in Spanish, they behave a little bit differently from English adjectives. But the idea behind them is the same, is they describe a noun. They modify, we would say, a noun and give it some inherent characteristic or quality. So that could be anything from color to size to some sort of state of being, an emotional state, something like that. So let's take a look at this sentence below. Quiero comprar una casa nueva. So in this sentence, we have the adjective nueva, which means new. And the sentence as a whole means I want to buy a new house. We notice that una casa is a singular feminine noun. So casa is a feminine noun. Una casa, a house, that's a singular unspecified house. And when we have an adjective that modifies una casa, we have to actually change the ending of the adjective to agree, as we'd say, in both number and gender with the noun. So nuevo is what we would call maybe the base adjective. And then you have to change the ending to match the noun, casa nueva. Anything else that you would add to that, David?
No, I would say that's correct. Let's have a look at a second example that we prepare for you, which is Nos vemos en el Parque Central, where we see each other in the Central Park. So we had in the first sentence the adjective nuevo, which becomes nueva if it's in front of a feminine noun, like la casa, una casa. And in this case, we have central. Central is the adjective here because this is the way we are trying to describe how the park is. So this is Central Park. And as we can see here, central ends in a consonant. So at least for nouns in singular, we don't change the ending. So there is no need to add here an A or an O to mark this dependency to the noun. So el Parque Central, la Plaza Central, Central Square. But as you can see here, we see a trend, which is we place adjectives after the noun, not before the noun, as it happens in English. So notice that we say el Parque Central, la Plaza Central, la Casa Central, la Casa Nueva. But it's also possible to place adjectives before the nouns, as it happens also in English. And that's why we wanted to bring some examples to you. So, but I think before we mention that, I would like to share this example sentence with you. So if we look at this sentence, tenemos tres hijos mayores. We have three older children. We see that here we're using an adjective like mayores, older. It agrees also with the noun in not only in gender but also in number. So here we see mayores in the plural form. But what if we have another example like this one that I'm adding here on this to the screen. Desayuno muy temprano cada mañana. I eat breakfast very early every morning. Um, there are certain words in Spanish that behave very similar to adjectives, but they are not adjectives in the sense that they are not describing the characteristics of a noun. So in this case, we have cada mañana, which means every morning. So in these cases, we have different words, determiners, that help us understand what we are talking about, but they are not specifying characteristic of mañana. So what I'm adding here, what I'm saying here is that we need to be very careful with the adjectives. We should be able to recognize them to know what we can place, what we should place after the noun and what comes before the noun. If it's a determiner, so if it helps us understand, for example, it's about a number, un carro, un coche, dos coches, then we will place these numbers before the noun, as it also happens with the determiners, with todos los coches, cada coche. But let's go back to our topic, adjectives, because they are very interesting in Spanish since they can take both positions. So remember, we have a noun like parque or casa. So if you remember this first example, quiero comprar una casa nueva, there are certain adjectives in Spanish that we can place both in different positions. So David, what do we have here? So we are using this adjective, nueva, and we want to show here two example sentences. Let me help you with the first one. What will you say about this one?
So for this sentence, estoy trabajando en una nueva empresa desde enero, that would translate to something like, I've been working at a new company since January. And you'll see the same word nueva that you saw in the earlier sentence example, the one we just put on the screen. And in both cases, it means new. But in this case, in this sentence, it actually comes before the noun that it modifies. And that kind of might be a little confusing when you learn in Spanish that most adjectives come after the noun. Well, here's an example of a specific adjective that can come before or after, as David said, and the meaning actually doesn't change. So when you say estoy trabajando en una nueva empresa, you can also say estoy trabajando en una empresa nueva también also, and that would have the same meaning. So first off, let's just be clear that most adjectives can't do this. It's actually a select list of adjectives, not very many, that can go before or after. And the reason you'd want to do this is probably more of just a stylistic choice. If you think that it sounds better, or if you're writing in literature and you think that it would read better, there are certain adjectives that can come in front of the noun. So David, I'll pass it over to you for another example of when this is the case.
Yes, so we see the same here in this question. ¿Sabes dónde consigo ese bello libro que me recomendó Andrés? Do you know where I can get that beautiful book that Andrés recommended to me? As we can see here, bello is in front of libro. It appears before, and as you were saying, David, this is more of a choice of the speaker for literary purposes, because it reminds me of a poem. It's a resource that it's not very common in colloquial language, and that's why we prefer to place these adjectives right after the noun. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible to have a very similar construction to what it is in English. So that being said, it sounds great that we can place adjectives in both positions, but today I think we have a collection of 5 adjectives that are very, very useful. And they are very important because if we place them before the noun or after the noun, the meaning is going to change. So we thought this is very important to mention, and that's why we are bringing them to you today. So I'm gonna show you here on the screen what adjectives are we going to talk about. So, antiguo, viejo, pobre, gran or grande. We will see what form is correct in what situation, what context, and único. So those are the 5 adjectives we are going to talk about, and we are going to show different example sentences with the different meanings. And let's get started with antiguo. So antiguo and viejo have a very similar meaning. Um, if we look at the definition, antiguo means old, ancient, former in English. So these are the meanings of this adjective, but let's have a look at the different example sentences so that we can understand when it means old, when it means ancient, and when it means former. I have this example sentence. Cuando era niño, vivía en una casa antigua. So in this case, when we have antiguo placed after the noun, we are talking about an old house. So in this case, when I was a child, I used to live in an old house. This would be the translation of una casa antigua. But what happens if we say something different? For example, en mi antigua casa teníamos una biblioteca grande. En mi antigua casa teníamos una biblioteca grande. I'm referring here not to an old house, but to my former house. I'm talking about the house where I used to live before. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's old. It is the former house. So here we see how important it is to pay attention to the position of these adjectives because the meaning of the sentence change. So in my former house, we had a big library. But what happens to the next adjective, David? So we have the adjective viejo, which whose definition is very similar to antiguo. What does it mean?
So viejo is a really important adjective in Spanish, one you'll probably learn early on as you learn Spanish. It means old or aged. So in many cases, it refers to age of someone that you're talking about, so an older person. And you will also see an example where it can refer more to kind of in the same vein as la antigua casa, the old or the former house. It has more of like an old former sort of meaning. So let's take a look at the first example sentence. We say, El señor Rodríguez es un viejo amigo mío. So here you see viejo coming before the noun amigo, and this would translate to something like, Mr. Rodriguez is an old friend of mine. We're not actually talking about his age. We don't know how old he is, but it's the way in English you would say this person is an old friend. We go way back. You know, we met in college. We've been friends for years. That's the meaning that this is conveying when viejo comes before amigo. In the next sentence, we say, El señor Rodriguez es un hombre viejo. Mr. Rodriguez is an old man, and this refers to his actual age. He's an elderly person. He is physically old. He has a lot of years, tiene muchos años, and that would be what that means. So maybe not the biggest difference between those two meanings, but it is important that you note that viejo does change meaning a little bit when it comes before or after the noun.
Yep.
So let's move on to the next word. And this one has a little bit more of a nuanced distinction, I would say. So I think it's a great example. And that word is pobre, which means in some cases poor or impoverished, but in other cases unfortunate. And I think of the song from The Little Mermaid, Poor Unfortunate Souls. So let's see. David, let's display the first example sentence. I'll have you talk about it. Yeah, there it is.
So we have here, ese pobre chico tiene pocos amigos. That poor boy has few friends. So in this case, we are not referring, we are not talking about this boy being poor, not having the means, not having money, but just rather he's unfortunate, he's not lucky, he has few friends. And this is the meaning that this adjective has when it is placed before the noun. Whereas we have this same adjective in a different sentence that I'm gonna show to you here on the screen. In this case, we have Yo le di $5 a una mujer pobre en la calle. I gave $5 to a poor woman in the street. So it's clear here that we are talking about a person who has not enough money, and yeah, I help her in this case. So I'm talking about una mujer pobre. So pobre after the noun means something different, and this is yeah, the lack of money, of resources. If we go back here, just have a look at it. Pobre chico means yeah, this is a poor boy who has few friends. So as we can see in English, there is no big distinction since we always place these words before the noun. It's clear that it can have two meanings. But in Spanish, we have this faculty of changing the position and also affecting the meaning of the adjective. And I think we can skip to the next adjective. That's also very, very important. I think we know this one, grande. This is the basic form, and the short version of it is gran. And it's important to see here that we will use gran when it is placed before the noun. But let's have a look at some examples. But before we do that, just have a look that grande means big, huge, great, large. So let me show you this example that we prepared here. Esta es una gran oportunidad de aprender español. This is a great opportunity to learn Spanish. So in this case, we are using gran to describe oportunidad, opportunity, with the sense of great. So we are not talking here about the size, the physical size that it implies when using grande in Spanish, if it's placed after the noun. So in this case, we are talking about a great opportunity, una gran oportunidad. And as you can see, here we use the short form gran oportunidad. And that this all this only happens when we are talking about a noun in the singular, because I can also say ellos son grandes amigos. So there we will use the full version, grandes, and the adjective also agrees, yeah, with the noun in number and gender. Not only in number, because grandes ends in e. So just keep that in mind. Gran is the form, the short version that we use in front of nouns in singular. But let's have a look at an example where big has its traditional meaning, meaning huge, large. So, or even grown, as we can see here in this example. Ya soy un hombre grande. Puedo tomar mis decisiones yo mismo. I'm already a grown man. I can make my decisions myself. I think, I hope. So as we can see here, hombre grande. Grande is a word that we use also when referring to age in Spanish. So this can mean I'm a big man or I'm a grown man. In Spanish, it doesn't make the difference. So I hope it's clear to you. So just remember, if we use gran, that means great, and if we use grande, that is probably referring to a big physical form. And let's go to the last adjective that we want to present today, which is único. David, único. What word can we think of when we are translating this into English? It's very similar.
So the one that I think is easiest to recognize is unique. They look almost the same. They're cognate, so they look and sound very similar, and they have the same meaning. But you can also translate único as only. So this is the last of the 5 adjectives that we're presenting that changes meaning depending on where it is relative to the noun. So we'll see in this example here, en mi antigua empresa, yo era el único ingeniero. I always can never pronounce that word. Ingeniero. In my old company, I was the only engineer. So when único comes before the noun, it means only. And you see, we also included mi antigua empresa, which would mean my old company, not old as in it has a big age, but it's my former company. So we see único means only before the noun. And then in the second example, we say, let's get it on the screen.
Here, it's there.
Okay. Soy un ingeniero único porque también soy médico y filósofo. I'm a unique engineer because I'm also a doctor and a philosopher. So here, único follows ingeniero, and that means that it qualifies or modifies the noun engineer as unique. So just a little bit of a difference there from único ingeniero, only engineer, versus ingeniero único, unique engineer. So we hope that is a little bit clearer to you, clearer than it was when we started this episode. One thing that I'd like to point out as a native English speaker that helps me kind of keep these adjectives sorted in my mind was that when the adjective follows a noun, to me, it makes sense to think of it as like more of the literal translation of the adjective. Único means unique when it follows ingeniero, or pobre means poor, literally impoverished, without money, when it follows the noun. Grande, we would translate as big, and when it follows a noun, it means big. When you put these adjectives in front of nouns, they kind of take not necessarily less literal, but just a little bit more figurative meanings or translations. So unique becomes only, big becomes great, poor becomes unfortunate. So something that might help is just to think of the adjectives that follow nouns as very like, this is what it is more literal than the more figurative understanding when it comes before the noun. If that's confusing to you, ignore me. Don't listen to what I'm saying. But that's kind of how I like to think about it. So, okay, that is what we have to present to you today. And as always, we are going to answer a few questions, and then we'll present you with some example sentences to answer before we leave you with a homework question and sign off before next week.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen some good questions so far. So David, if you have any as well, please feel free to chime in with them, and then to our viewers, keep submitting them as you think of them as well.
Yeah, David, I found this question asked by Christopher regarding the use of antigua and viejo. So antigua, antiguo, it depends on what we are talking about, is used in both, like with both meanings that we introduced in the first part. And I wouldn't say this is only for an object and viejo for persons, because we can go back to this example sentence. En mi antigua casa teníamos una biblioteca grande. Yeah, in the house where I lived before, so the former house. But I can also say mi antiguo jefe, my former boss. So as we can see there, it is also possible to use antiguo with persons. Yeah, with professions, el antiguo presidente, for example. And the same happens also with viejo. So viejo means age or run down. So this is a way in Spanish to describe, to refer to something that is that's been existing for a long time. So I think those are in many cases interchangeable. So we can also, when we refer to antiguo as old, as we saw here, cuando era niño vivía en una casa antigua. In this case, we can also say vivía en una casa vieja, because here we are keeping this meaning, una casa antigua, una casa vieja. I think in general in Spanish, we tend to connect viejo with something that doesn't look great anymore, that is not useful anymore, maybe that needs a replacement. And I'm not saying here that all people, gente vieja, needs a replacement. It's a different. So when we are using viejo to refer to people, it means age. Yeah. But we tend to say we tend to use antiguo with cosas, with things, and yeah. But it's not a general rule. So Christopher, your question here: cuando would antiguo be for an object and viejo for persons? It depends on the situation. Antiguo sounds also more fancy. So antiguo doesn't necessarily mean that it's all run down, but it's rather it's ancient. You say, for example, griego antiguo to refer to ancient Greek in Spanish, griego antiguo.
David, could you also refer to a person as una persona antigua, like un hombre antiguo? That might not be the nicest way to, it might be kind of like calling someone ancient, but would that make sense if I said, este hombre es un hombre antiguo?
Él es un hombre antiguo. No.
That would not make sense.
No, it's better to use viejo.
Okay.
Yeah, because you would then think, okay, casa antigua, casa vieja, that works, but not for people. No, you would say people are all, las personas son viejas. There is even a verb which is to get old, envejecer, and that's why we think it's normal to use viejo with people when we are talking about their age. So that's a good question, actually. Thank you very much, David, because as a Spanish native speaker, I never have these questions, and they are always very, very interesting for me because I use the words, and sometimes I don't know why. Yeah, so that also helps me understand my mother tongue better.
So I see this question from Lee, and he says, why not use grande oportunidad? And one thing that I think that we should say, just to make it really clear if we haven't already, is when the word grande comes before a singular noun, regardless if it's masculine or feminine. So oportunidad is feminine. We have una oportunidad or la oportunidad. Regardless of the gender, if it's a singular noun, if grande comes before, it will always be gran. Is that right, David? So
Yes.
it's shortened before, it becomes gran before a noun, and it's always grande or grandes after a noun. And then you also mentioned that when it comes before, if it's plural, so we could say unas grandes oportunidades, some great opportunities, then you would use the full form grandes. But the only time you use gran, the shortened form, is before a singular noun. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So you have to decide both between, you have to figure out which meaning you want. Is it great or is it big? And then that'll help you figure out where to put the word. And only if the word is great, so only if it comes before the noun and it's a singular noun, will you use gran. So, and when you talk about a great opportunity, you do say una gran oportunidad. But if the word grande came after oportunidad, which might not make, it might make sense in a different context, a big opportunity, something like that, but you would say una oportunidad grande, or a big house, una casa grande. But a good, like a great idea would be una gran idea, or great ideas, some great ideas would be unas grandes ideas. Does that make sense? As I explained it?
And here we don't make the difference between objects and persons if we are talking about someone who is great. So I can also say, David es un gran amigo, and that's perfect. So he's a very good friend. So I think this is clear this time. There is also a very famous street in Madrid, Spain, which is called La Gran Via, the Great Avenue, the Great Street. It's not because it's large; it's because it's. I think it's the most important one. I've been there only once, twice, I think, but just for us as a reference. And this is something very used in often used in Spanish. So I think it's worth knowing it.
I also think of, on the other hand, El Rio Grande, which literally means the big river. It is a great river. I've never been to it. I'm sure it's wonderful, but it's a huge river as well. So Grande comes after Rio, and it literally means the big river.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Okay. David, how about we go ahead and do some example test sentences for our amazing viewers and leave them with a homework question. And then if some other comments or questions come through, if we have time, we can answer those as well. But I want to just be respectful of people's time and start wrapping up.
Yep. So let's get started.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so here's the first one. We say, nuestro tiene 5 habitaciones. So our blank has 5 rooms. And there are 3 options: apartamento nuevo, nuevo apartamento, or the third option is that both are correct.
I like this question, David. And I think we can tell our learners that the right answer is, what do you think?
Do you want to take it away or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
So David, I'll choose David's answer because he has the same name as we do. And he's also correct. So he says that both answers are or can be correct. And that is a great answer. So it's number 3. And if you remember at the beginning of this episode, we talked about the specific adjective nuevo, nueva, nuevos, nuevas, and the fact that it actually doesn't really change meaning when it comes before or after a noun. So you could say nuestro nuevo apartamento or nuestro apartamento nuevo, and you'd be saying the same thing, a new apartment. So both answers are correct. A little bit tricky, so good job to everyone who got that right. And let's move on to the next sentence. This one might be a little tricky too, so good luck. La de Miguel fue construida hace 5 años. So we're saying the blank of Miguel was constructed or built 5 years ago. So do we want to say la casa antigua or la antigua casa?
This one is a bit more difficult because I would say that it's not the same situation that we had in the first sentence where all the 3 options were correct, 1, 2, 3, and in this case you see that both are not correct in this context.
It looks like we have about half and half answers, which I expected. This one's a little bit challenging. Okay, Debbie, do you want to do the big reveal?
Yes, let's go for it. So, in this case, we will say that the right answer, as Joy says, is the second one. La antigua casa de Miguel. La antigua casa de Miguel fue construida hace 5 años, and we left here 5 years ago on purpose because we wanted to show you this. If we are placing antiguo, antigua, before the noun, we are referring to the former house where Miguel used to live before. And if we say casa antigua, la casa antigua, we're saying that's an old house. That's a house that was built, I don't know, 100 years ago. So that's the intention of this. La antigua casa de Miguel is the right answer because here we are talking about the former house, the house where Miguel lived before, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's all, because it was constructed, built 5 years ago. So this was a very difficult one. Well done for those who gets the right answer. This is a very difficult topic. Don't feel frustrated or confused by that. Our recommendation to you is that you practice the 5 adjectives whose meaning changes. That you come up with different example sentences that you would say in Spanish for you to get familiar with the meaning. And that would be my piece of advice for you. But all other adjectives have a certain flexibility, but we tend to put them after the noun. So this is how most of these adjectives work in Spanish. And if you have any other question, let us know. We will be checking that here. I saw a question. I think it was Ken here. Does the emphasis change depending on whether nuevo comes before or after the noun? The emphasis, yes, I think so, because we are. It's a good way to say that we are talking about a brand new thing, for example. But the meaning doesn't change. So basically, what we are saying here is, I'm talking about something that's new. En mi nueva empresa, at my new company, we are 100 employees. Versus en mi empresa nueva, that sounds very normal. So the emphasis is put on nuevo if we place it in front of the noun. So that's a good question. Emphasis changes, of course, because we are focusing on something that's new. That's great, but the meaning is exactly the same. So it's just more about pragmatics, about what we want to say and how we want to say, rather than using different meanings with these adjectives. But just for you, just remember the meaning of those 5 adjectives that are very special, and let's try to practice them. And that's why we have also a little homework for you for our next episode. Maybe I can display this here on the screen, David. I'm allowed. Este año conocí a un que admiro mucho. So here we have 2 options, escritor grande or gran escritor. And we'll check this sentence next week, next Tuesday, same time.
Notice this sentence I didn't even realize until now, but we use some of what we learned from 2 past episodes, the verb conocer, and which I think was our 2nd episode. And then last week we talked about the preposition a. So we have both of those mixed in. Those won't really help you figure out the answer to this question. I just thought it was kind of cool to come full circle in that way. But we will leave you with this question, and like David said, we'll get back to it next week. We're wrapping up on time here, so we're going to say goodbye. But as always, thank you so much for joining us this week. Always a pleasure. So great to have new faces, familiar faces. If you want to keep commenting questions, suggestions for future episodes, please feel free to do that even after the broadcast ends. You can also reach out to us on social media. You know where to find us on Facebook because you're here right now, but we're also at Babel USA on Twitter, Instagram. I think we're on TikTok now too. Check us out. Connect with us on our Quora space. So we're Everything Language is what it's called, and we will post the link below. I think W just put it on the screen. And then also Babel Magazine is a great way to get involved with a lot of other language learning resources about Spanish, but also plenty of other languages too. If you're in lockdown and quarantine and you're bored, that's a great resource to explore. But please let us know what you'd like to hear from us in future episodes. We plan to be back next week at the same time, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And then we'll keep this going for as long as there's a demand for it. So thank you so much to everyone again who joined us. Davi, do you have any parting words?
Yes, I saw a question, and I would like to say a few words.
Yeah.
Before I say goodbye. Phyllis, this is a good way also to remember or to understand how the meaning can be a bit different slightly when we are talking about nuevo, nueva, which means new. I would say this is not always the rule, but this is a good way to remember that we are talking about something newly acquired if we place it before the noun or after the noun if it's something newly made. But I can talk about mi nuevo coche or mi coche nuevo, and depending on the context, that can be also explained there. And this doesn't depend on the position of nuevo, because if I think we don't make the difference in Spanish. We don't. It's not as clear as it is for other adjectives. For the other adjectives, as we saw with pobre, antiguo, viejo, único, and there is a fifth one. So I just wanted to say this. I hope it's clear. It's facultative. You can change the position of nuevo. And no big deal. Don't worry about that. And that was my last answer. And I'm already looking forward to next Tuesday. I'll be very happy to see you. And yeah, we wish you a happy Tuesday from wherever you're watching us. Adiós desde Berlín.
Adiós a todos. Hasta la próxima semana. Bye, everyone.